Hi, folks. Welcome to First Friday, sponsored by Wakuho Network for Professionals of Color. We're going to go ahead and jump right in and get started with our featured First Friday speaker. And I have a little bit of a bio here. So please join me in welcoming Mel deVivar. Mel deVivar is an activist, educator, and entrepreneur based in the Bay Area. Most recently, Mel served as the Assistant Director of Housing and Res Life at the University of San Francisco, and she just transitioned outside of higher ed and into the world of nonprofit and design. She's currently the head of programs for Harness U, an organization that aims to teach young people about critical soft skills needed to secure a job in the tech industry. She's also studying UX design under a full diversified design scholarship through Design Lab. She plans to continue to grow her brand and use design as a tool to continue her work as an activist and philanthropist. Those who know Mel best know that she's one of the kindest, most creative, and most genuine humans, and her dedication and passion is unlike any other. Please join me in welcoming Mel.
Yay, thanks. Oh, teary. Thanks, Matt.
Mel, I'm gonna go ahead and spotlight your video, so you'll be our main attraction here. So Mel, thank you for joining us today. I am excited to be interviewing one of my closest friends and be talking a little bit about kind of your journey and what your future holds. And yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and jump in. If you just wanna start off and just telling us a little bit about kind of what's new with you, because there's been a lot of changes, I think, for folks that know you in this space. There's been a lot of changes over the last couple of months. So I'd love to hear about those things.
Yes. So first of all, thanks everyone for showing up on a Friday in December. I'm really excited to be here. I was like, almost was like, what is that me? Like being a speaker this time around, I saw my face on a flyer. So thank you, Matt and Susu, for putting this together. Gosh, what I've been doing, y'all, for the past few months. Well, Matt really summed it very nicely in my intro. I left higher ed from a career of 12 years this past August. So leaving during a pandemic is probably one of the most scariest experiences. Shout out to Morena. She was one of my RDs I worked with, so she definitely knew the journey. And so I left and jumped into my first ed tech startup experience. And so I work for Harness U, which is a super small social impact company based out of the East Bay. And our goal is to pretty much like really help young adults prepare for work. So I get to actually do one of the coolest things I've done, and that is create a career to pathway program workshop for first generation students. And we're also creating something for non-traditional learners and adults, for folks who just didn't have a chance to go to college for whatever means. And we really want, in a sense, kind of like, actually we are doing is challenging corporate America to really rethink their hiring practices and not have a college degree be like the only filter of why people apply. If folks aren't aware, maybe there's assumptions around there, the tech industry it's pretty notorious for, nepotism and hiring kind of like it's same people. And I get to be in a space where I get to disrupt and kind of like poke my nose and, webinars and, like these kind of sessions and speak these kinds of projects that I'm working on. So there's that. And recently I signed up for user experience bootcamp. And if folks aren't sure what user experience is, it's pretty much taking like design and problem solving together. So, those like digital apps everyone use, or like a website. So pretty much I get to create a solution for a problem. I used to be an art major way back in the day. And so I got to actually use what I learned in art and graphic design and put it to use. So my dream, y'all, will be working somewhere abroad where I get to work on a social impact problem, being with like underserved, under-resourced communities, and really helping create solutions. So I don't necessarily believe that tech is the only solution, which I know like that's what we're going into this remote world. I'm a big believer that tech is a part of a solution, but sometimes you could just take a look at who the people you're serving and looking at the process they're going through and their like user journey, you're able to tweak something along the way so that companies don't have to spend a lot of money, right? So I'm really fascinated with like kind of that concept, and how I'm using higher ed is pretty much the same thing I'm doing, right? So I used to design learning, training experiences for our students. So now I get to use that in my current like boot camp program. So it's, I'm in week 2. It's a lot. It's a lot of work I'm doing, and so far so good. So ask me in 6 months when I graduate how how it is, or even do like a mid check-in and see kind of like how my journey is.
Thank you, Mel. I'm going to remind folks that if you have any questions that you'd like to ask at any point during the conversation, feel free to drop them in the chat, unmute, whatever you're comfortable with. Sometimes people will even private message them to me if they want me to ask on their behalf. So just want to put all those options out there. But I do have a question for you, Mel. I think one of the reasons why I really just have a lot of love for you is because I think what I have always known about you is you have a culture of activism. And I think that you embed this culture of activism in like everything you do. So I'll give you an example. You and I were the first, this is how we met. We were co-chairs together for the Marketing and Registration Committee for the WCUHO Annual Conference under Margarita's leadership. And I remember taking this and thinking that it was such a technical experience, right? Okay, we need to run the registration process, we need to market the event, and you, in your kind of activist nature, kind of infused ways in which we were going to represent for, you know, communities of color, underrepresented communities, folks who are not cisgender. And so we had our first gender inclusive restrooms, we had pronouns on name tags, we had all of those things that seemed like small measures, but you were super passionate about making sure that that was there. And so and I think that follows you in every aspect of your life, right? You're doing UX design and your passion is to continue activism through design. And so I just want to know, like, what parts of your story informed that and have created this activist in you?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Well, many know I like to tell stories, so I will tell a story. I'm actually going to preface it in regards to, I'm going to be real, y'all, like when it took me a long time to really embrace, like, I'm an activist. And I think for me, I had to really learn to find my authentic self in a word that has a lot of high expectations. And so Baby Mel remembers just simple things like translating for my parents. So I'm first gen, daughter of immigrant parents who came from the Philippines. My mom and my dad were the first ones to come from their families. And so I just remember helping translate, reading credit card statements or going on the phone and calling customer service at like the age of like 10, 8. I mean, things that I even to this day, I don't like doing it myself. But I just remember doing that to help my mom. And so for many folks who may not know or know, my younger brother has autism. And so he is, I guess, like classified as like low function, which means he reads at like a kindergarten level. His social skills are very, he's really challenged with social skills. And so my mom takes care of him full time. And so I just remember, y'all, like being in the stores, and my brother has tantrums, and that's really hard for someone, you know, who's just 4 years older than your brother, and everyone's looking at you and you're trying to just like protect your family, and also just carrying a level of embarrassment too, because, you know, everyone's like looking at you, right? So I just remember just times when I had to just like listen to my mom, do whatever she said, or just even like shoo people away, or just like kind of, or it's something even just like look at people funny, but like, what are you looking at? Like, mind your business, right? And so at the time, it's, you know, it's like older daughter roles. It's what I needed to do to, in a sense, survive. That kind of carried me throughout my years. And so also something you may not know about me is that my dad is military, super strict. It's like his way or the highway, right? So I grew up as a rule follower and also a rebel at the same time, because I was someone who dreamed to live in New York City and like open up my like advertising company, or I wanted to be a dancer one time. Like I just dreamed really big. And my dad was like, no, you're going to go to this school to be a doctor, this school to be an engineer. And so I had to really straddle that for a long period of my life. And so I got into education, as many of us are the same. You wanted, to help people, people like us and our backgrounds. And so I came to higher ed wanting to help other first gen identified students to kind of figure out this shit, y'all. Like, college is a sticky system, and y'all know that. It's so complicated. And I think for me, I always have to remember through like hard decisions that we had to make as a department and all the levels of bureaucracy that, education wasn't created for people, for us and by us, right? And so I think in my earlier times, like mini adult Mel, when I was an RD, I didn't say much at work because I was too scared. And it was just like my dad, talking to me from like the background, like, well, don't be, as I guess people call a squeaky wheel. I don't really use that term, but y'all probably know what I'm talking about. So just stay diligent, just eye on the prize, get a job, help your family, go from there, right? So then I spent a lot of my career doing that, just kind of making it work. And then I became this person of like, hire Mel, she's really good at her work, has really high job ethic. And someone actually told me that you're a really good person to work with because you don't shake things up. And then at first I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I don't know what that means. But then I really started to internalize it because I was like, well, is that what I want to be known for? As someone who isn't going to say anything like that's going to cause like dissonance, right? So then it wasn't really I came to USF where I was really in an environment where like people spoke up. Like, it was just people teaching me about pronouns, people talking about like the burden of explaining to someone else about their identity journey and like breaking microaggressions and assumptions. And I was like, that environment ignited me to be like, okay, like I want this in my life more than just me kind of sitting back and doing the work, right? And so a lot of it was really, it was like that voice inside of you. Like, it was like, okay, Mel, you have this voice and it's speaking to you, and like something is not right. And it's that piece of just speaking up, not only for yourself, but for the, for the people you're serving, whether that's your team, whether that's your students. But I also had to like balance it with my authentic way. That was my voice. And so pretty much I had to I found that strength like recently, last 4 years, to really, in a sense, say like I am an activist because I'm pretty much carrying all of the history and the ancestral, struggles that my own people had to, endure. And then my parents' immigrant journey, they came here and was like, well, I don't necessarily have to, like, there's part of being activist, like you're speaking up in meetings and, you're speaking your truth based on the data and the surveys and all the lived experiences that we're telling our students. And also I got to do this so that other people who are either following in my footsteps or like younger professionals or just even college students, they don't have to while they may experience the same environment again, because it's going to take generations to change our cultures, I want them to feel they have role models to look up to. And so I don't know if I'm on track, but yeah, I'm gonna speak my truth anyways. And so that's pretty much kind of how I've really learned to become my own activist. I'll send a resource later. Radical Love is this collective coalition by this amazing professor at USF who I met. She also identifies as Filipina. And it's how I learned that, with Radical Love, there's a level of compassion that is needed. But also I learned sometimes your compassion is fatigued out, and that's okay, because we are all givers in this space, and giving so much is going to burn us out. And so it's a cool resource to kind of listen to other stories. And I had to also learn that I can't fight every fight, and that I have to refuel my compassion, cup of tea, bucket, however you want to call it, so that I stay grounded and that I'm going back to my ultimate purpose, which is what I've been doing in higher ed, in my ed tech, and now in UX, is I want to uplift and serve people. I want to create systems that's culturally responsive, whether that's in the digital world or some social impact problem. And so I've also learned through activism that your purpose can change throughout your life and your career, just making sure you have that core focus, that pillar that you want to hug every day, and just be okay, this like program's really hard. It's a lot to, like, I feel like imposter syndrome. I'm learning everything. I'm such a newbie, but also at the end of the day, I still want to bring my lens of like accessibility, belonging, community, and authenticity to every work that I do. So yeah, that's pretty much that, y'all.
So
I
Matt,
love it.
may I ask a question?
Of course, Maggie, go
Of course,
for it.
Maggie.
Because I'm just sitting here and I'm having this like flashback to a WoW story that you shared. And, you know, the first rule of WoW story is you're not supposed to talk about WoW story because everything that's, you know, shared there stays there. But I'm going to talk about WoW story. Is that something with Fight Club? I think it is. Oh my gosh, this is WoW story. Anywho, so I remember you shared a letter to your younger self.
Yes.
And as I hear you share your journey and your truth, and this, you know, yes, Brenda, yes, she's saying, speak your truth. Speak the truth, because I think it's the truth of so many of us also, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we speak our truth in a way, that's part of your activism. You're liberating others to speak their truth and acknowledge that truth. So here's the question. If you had the moment right now to speak to that younger Mel in this moment, what are the 3 things you would share with her? What are the 3 things? Because part of the journey, and this is my personal experience, part of the journey is healing the wounds of our journey, of the journey itself. And sometimes we need to, you know, have those conversations, which you did so lovely when you shared that letter to your younger self during the WoW stories. I don't know if anyone else was there, but that was such an impactful moment for me, because I, you know, I know you and I love you. But anywho, I'm giving you some time to think about the 3 things you would share with your younger self.
Yeah. So just for context, first of all, Maggie, of course, as always, thank you bringing those questions. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Just for context, the letter I wrote was a letter to my younger self about my relationship with money, which y'all know is a complex, very intricate topic in itself. So I would tell younger Mel, don't be afraid to ask for help, because as first gen, it's like we're the first in our families to figure shit out on our own. And that there's this idea of like, at least in my experiences in college, you're in college. For me, it was survival because I had to go to college. It was the only thing that my parents told me to do. And also knowing that's going to be socioeconomic mobility for them. But then after you leave, it's like you're grown folk now. So like, you went to college, now you kind of have this expectation, you know everything, but really you don't, right? So a lot of it is, I just, though, like I have a lot of friends and like a community of people, I felt I didn't really ask for help when I really needed it. So that's number 1, is don't be afraid to ask for help. It will be okay. It's okay if you don't know, because that's why you have people to connect. And back then, I didn't have Google to Google everything. So it's like, I don't know what to do. Second thing I would tell myself is that, like imposter syndrome is real, and that it's not you, it's the societal structure that has created these expectations, and that there's nothing wrong with you, that you are enough, you're more than enough. I'm going through that right now in my program. I'm learning like product design, product management. It's a whole new industry. And yeah, like on the Monday, I was like, oh my God, like, can I do this? Yes, I can do this. And I will do this. However, I want to teach my younger self, like, to start having those affirmations earlier and saying, there's nothing wrong with you, girl. There's nothing wrong with you. And then lastly, I would say, advice is just don't be so hard on yourself. Like I stress so much. And when I get stressed, some of you may know, I make this weird like jaw noise. It's really annoying. And it hurts, but it's just it's how I carry tension in myself. And so really a lot of it is, I would, tell my younger self, like, Mel, why, like, literally, why are you stressing? Like, what's your fear? what is your fear, and then what's the worst thing that really could happen, other than, of course, like just, like death and other, I mean, that's really, really like extreme, but it's like, really, what is the worst thing could happen if you don't get this assignment done, or if you didn't get that job, right? Or I remember grad school, I was stressing, like, you got to be on a paper. I mean, I remember you get a C on a paper one time during grad school, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not an educator, right? And so I think it's definitely those three. Ask for help. What did I say for the second one? Ask for help.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes, imposter syndrome is real. And then, like, don't be like, literally give yourself grace. That is just the most, because I'm standing here now and I'm okay. Like, I'm more than okay. And it's, it's one of those things, though. I had to go through all those experiences to get to where I'm at. So I'm thankful for that. But if I could go back in time, just be like, hey, this is like, look at me now. I don't think I changed. I kind of look the same from before. So, like, you will be fine. And these are 3 tips that you could start earlier, so that you don't give yourself like feeling of like, anxiety and ulcers and all those things that kind of go bad. Mm-hmm.
May I, in this moment, just take this time to just say thank you to baby Mel, just to say thank you to everything that she did, to all the things that only you had to go through. Just a thank you, in case you haven't heard that before, but I'm sure you have. But as an acknowledgement, as you share your truth and your journey, just a thank you to, because I use baby Mel because that's the language you use.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
baby Mel, thank you very much, baby Mel.
Mm-hmm. She says you're welcome.
Thanks, Maggie, for that really great question. I think along those same lines, I think you earlier alluded to being told not to be.
Hold on, y'all. Technical difficulties. Is this working? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you still sound fine.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Okay, wait, I lost the Zoom screen. There you go. Okay, cool.
Okay. You alluded earlier to being told not to be a squeaky wheel, and that people enjoy working with you because you didn't shake the table before. And then the chat, some folks also described having similar experiences with similar sentiments, right? I think there's an expression in Spanish that Brenda reminded us, calladita te ves más bonita. So quiet, you look more beautiful, which is so problematic. I think one of the things that is very apparent in my relationship with you and knowing kind of how you operate through the world, I think that you really resonate with like many women of color. If you notice, besides me, everyone who's attended today's meeting is a woman of color, which is, also makes me think like, where are the men that have attended the past meetings, right? I would love to find out the underpinning of the sexism that happens there. But I guess, are you able to like really recognize that for yourself as like a mentor to women of color? And as I'm saying that, Kafele is in the waiting room.
I was just about to say that.
So besides me and Kafele, but I think, I think, are you able to really like conceptualize that for yourself, see yourself as a mentor for women of color, and what does that mean to you?
Yes. Yes. And I got to give like a big shout out to like, WOW, Wakuho, women of Wakuho. And I think many might know, like before I wasn't super involved in Wakuho, and then I came back, and it was really because I was like, well, I didn't know many like mentors, like female identified mentors in housing at the time. I'm like, well, if I don't have one, I'll make myself one. So that was kind of how I came in, because actually let me sidestep. One of my former RDs, former RD who helped me get into UX design, she described me in this like analogy. So I don't want to like butcher it, but I'm the type of person that will like climb up the mountain, right? And I will find a flashlight at the top, and then I'll come back down, and then I'll take everyone else with me and then show you like how to get up. And when she said that to me, I was like, okay, you totally know who I am. that's like who I am. And I, like, sometimes when it comes to like, once again, like titles and, like mentors and activists, it has this expectation that I know for me sometimes, because of like my, how hard I am myself, I just kind of like, okay, like that's cool. But I really just try to like not get so caught up on the expectation, just do as I go. Right. And so when my friend told me that analogy, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like how I am, because that's so important to me. And I think it's just because like our world is so big and our field may seem so big, but then, or sorry, higher ed, right? But at the end of the day, right, it's like we're still so small. So I just don't like seeing people kind of struggle, if that makes sense, right? And especially since I wanted to really bring other folks that, yeah, I mean, pretty much like other folks, like women of color in Wakuho, and have them feel like they have a sense of belonging so that they feel like they can be themselves. Cause I've just been in so many spaces where I'm just like, oh, I don't really feel like this is my like crew or people, or I had to code switch, as many of us had to do part on the daily as well. And so I think it wasn't really, once again, the last 4 years being at USF with the combination of being part of Wakuho really made me, not made me, but really invited me to embrace the concept of like, I am a mentor for women of color. And now I get to bring that into UX design, because I, on the side, I'm not really good at Instagram, but I created a new Instagram, which will love all your support later. I'll drop that later, shameless plug later. But I'm like putting out my work out there, which is really vulnerable and, like, oh my God, I'm putting myself out there. But there's people that are like adding me because they know I'm in the program. And even I'm only 2 weeks in the program, I'm really trying to help them. Like, hey, I'm interested in the program, or I just started the foundation course. And I'm like, yeah, like here's some resources to help, because once again, like I just don't want them to struggle. And also when I took my first UX class, I actually didn't reach out to people. I was pretty much solo, and I didn't really utilize the community that I was part of. And so now I just want to learn from that experience so I could help other people just make their lives a little bit more, not only easier, but having them feel empowered, and that knowing that they're not alone. So that's, yeah. So I'm just trying to like, once again, embrace that pillar of who I am into all different aspects of my life. Oh, thanks, Matt. That is my new Instagram account. And it's public, so anybody could just join, which is like super new to me. I don't do public accounts, but I am doing this one.
I'll pause here and see if anyone else has any questions that they want to pose to Mel, either through video, audio, or through the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah, great.
So you shared that after being in higher ed for 12 years, you left, and it was during the pandemic. 12 years is a long time, and I'm sure we speak for many of us. It feels, sometimes comfortable and a little nerve-wracking to leave. And in addition, you left in the middle of a pandemic. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about what was the thought process? When did you want to leave higher ed? When did you want to go explore other avenues? What helped you transition out? How was that whole process?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm looking at Morena because she was there with me, and I just look over. I look at you because it's like we were like really in it together. I started looking outside of higher ed actually last year, summer of 2019. My first, and that's because I was really craving a new industry. I really wanted to learn something brand new, different environment. I moved to the Bay Area because that's kind of like where opportunity was. And so I was like, well, I'm in the Bay Area now, I'm close to family. Let's kind of see, like, I don't know, what else is out there. And so as I dabbled in, like I used to go to, there's a company called General Assembly, which I know they're located in big cities, but they would offer like just free programs, workshops. It's a company that promotes like non-traditional alternative pathways to education. So they're kind of this, what they call boot camps. We all probably heard of it, certificate programs. So I remember I went to my first session, was actually a design thinking session. If many folks are not aware, design thinking is like a methodology to design a product or design something, right? But this was more of a life design experience. So I went probably like 2018, really loved it. And then kind of just like didn't do anything. And then last summer of June 2019, I actually got to go to Stanford for this program called Life Design. It's through their design school. And I went with two colleagues, and one from Career Services and one from our like academic success center. And so we, I'm sorry, it was our AVP. But it's pretty much how do we create like a life design class that we can emulate for like first year students or college students, right? So I fell in love, y'all. Like I was on crutches. I had sprained my ankle. I didn't care. I was gonna go to Stanford and be immersed in this experience because I was just so curious on how I could really take like inquiry and like my like skill of empathy and develop a program or learning experience for college students in a very methodical way. So it's different outside of those like higher ed like theories that we learn. So I was like, oh, this is cool. And actually, this is fun fact. It wasn't so that we had to break up in little small groups, and we had to do our own like life design exercise. And shout out to Lester Deans, which I know Maggie, you know him from Santa Clara. He was in my group, and he was actually the first person I told in my school that I wanted to be a UX designer. So I remember so scared, like, oh my gosh, is like my boss gonna find out? Is my team gonna find out? Like, is people are gonna be like, oh my God, what are you doing? But I was like, you know what? Like, I'm taking a chance. And I also, trusted this person. So yeah, so that happened. And then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start applying. So I actually had my first interview, y'all, 7 a.m. on the morning of RA training on a Friday, because the recruiter was based out of the East Coast. So it was so that was that. And then it was just a whole process of trying to just kind of figure out like what I wanted to do. So one tip I have that I always share with everyone, if they are, like seeking or figuring out their life transition, is just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's something that you love. So just because I'm good at crisis management, just because I'm good at supervision, just because I'm good at project management and creating Excel spreadsheets and delegating tasks doesn't necessarily mean that's what I absolutely like love, right? So I had to really sit down with myself and do kind of like these life design exercises to first come to terms and accept it and be okay with that. Because like I said, like I'm good at crisis management, doesn't mean that's like for the rest of my life, right? So then I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm job searching. I need to give myself kind of a plan. And so I then created a financial plan to ensure that if either I quit my job without a job or some major, thing happened, AKA COVID, which was actually before COVID, I had a financial plan. And so I pretty much did this whole long exercise and really just made those decisions on what I'm going to spend my money on, what I need to save money on. And so pretty much, how we always say in Res Life, make sure you are saving money like as you're paying for rent. That is so key, y'all, because you just never know what's going to happen. So, okay, cool. So I'm getting ready to be like, I'm going to leave. This is like spring of, what is it called, of this year. And then the pandemic hit. So I was like, I cannot leave yet. And my co at the time just left for another school right before. So it was myself and my team. And so, yeah, so I stayed on, y'all. I stayed on, and it was probably the best decision I made, because I really felt that was the time for me to really like feel like I was a leader in the department. And the stuff that we had to go through with like just all the ickiness was really hard, but I was able to be like, damn, like I really wanted to empower my team the best I could so that they could continue on without me. And so, yeah, so while the pandemic was happening, I also picked up a consulting gig with my startup company. So I was doing that like very small hours a week just to start, I guess, like building up the program that I was asked to do. And then finally it was August, and I was like, enough's enough, yo. I gotta really put myself up front. And so I was able to save the money that I needed to, at least for 6 months to 9 months of my savings. And I had to say goodbye to my team. And so it's it was a very long process, but I had to just really think about like once again, like what am I good at versus what I'm love. And I was luckily able to find this next position. And something I also learned through this whole like transition is that, this position I'm in right now, like, I don't know if it's, how long it's gonna be, like it's temporary. And that's because we just don't know what's going to happen. Right. But I took a risk because I wanted to explore like the world of ed tech and kind of see like what's it going. And I have to also really, really embrace just like really anything could happen and make decisions based on the information that you have at the moment and not go back and be like, oh no, like that sucked. Like, I have a tendency to do that. Like, oh, I wish I'd done this, or like, oh, like, why does that happen? And now it's like, I don't have time for that because I just don't want to kind of sit. So hoping I answer your question, Susu, but it's pretty much, and also a lot of it was, I just really needed, once again, like to be honest with myself, and that I knew the longer I stayed, it was a disservice to what my goals and dreams were as well. So that was really something I had to fully embrace and own and be okay. And people had, their own opinions, and, like, thank you for sharing. And then if I didn't like it, then I would go to, people that brought me up. And so that's kind of the nature of kind of what happened. And it was, so I'm here now. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good question.
Anybody else have any questions for Mel?
Because I could really go on.
Mel, I know it's kind of soon for my question and everything, but just hearing you talk, I feel that you talk about it's a disservice for yourself, but like it's a disservice for higher ed to lose someone like you too. So do you see, I know it's like I said, it's soon, but do you see yourself learning and getting all this experience outside of higher ed and then coming back?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. And, I want to, I know like we kind of laughed about it, but I think it's a really valid point because, and I'm going to be honest, as usual, right? I've been seeing a lot of like people of color leaving the field, whether that's 1 year, whether that's 5 years, whatever the reason is. Like, it's not about, I'm trying to be like, making like assumptions. I think I just noticed a trend, and I've been in the field for 12 years. So I saw that coming in, right? I saw that with like my staff coming in and out, people hearing, and then I think it's just something for us to like kind of think about and have like conversations with people that we trust and see like what is there someone's reason. And I think that's why these groups are so important, because at the end of the day, because what I'm trying to say, y'all. Yeah, y'all, like my experiences in the industry has just been so like, I have these moments of like these kinds of communities, and I want to bring it back to the institution, but it's not quite there, right? Or there's all these barriers, or there's patriarchy, right? And there's just a lot of these challenges that I'm like, well, like I'm kind of burnt out, which is, what the big also reason was. And that's okay, because then where can I take my energy to something else, right? That will grow. So back to your question about being back in higher ed. I actually had a friend who found out I left, and she was just like, Mel, you have like such an entrepreneur spirit. You may not want to come back, because I think for me, I got really stifled in a 9-to-5 like job. And I think I liked about USF, at least because we were able to like run around with our laptops. And, even though it was like hard to go to meetings because we were always running around, I actually really liked that movement, because I never saw myself as like a cubicle person. And that's not saying anything for, someone's preference, but for my, like, for who I am, I'm just such an explorer. Like, I'm the person that's like, don't put the fork in the socket, but I'm going to do it anyways, because I want to see like how it feels. And so I don't know I really don't know what the future will entail. I think also I'm looking for a very different structure as well. Someone described working for a large organization and a startup company. So a large organization, whether that's like Facebook, Google, higher ed, you're on a cruise ship where there's like 500 plus, 1,000 employees on the cruise ship. And as you all know, it takes multiple levels of approval just for the boat to move 1 degree. But in a startup company, you're like in the sailboat with your team and you're like riding the waves, rocking with the winds, catching each other, because it's high risk and also high reward. So to me, it's just something very different. And I'm willing to explore that and kind of see like where I go. So ask me like, in 2 years, to see if I come back, and also just really, praying to the goddesses up there that higher ed is going to be like okay in general. But I think I've also been seeing a lot of higher ed, school. Let's see, I was on a call yesterday where there's this institution that's creating like a workforce department that's really trying to do initiatives for like companies to hire people that have not gone to college and to help them skill up because they didn't have the opportunity to go to college. So those are the kind of programs I would be interested in. It's still kind of higher ed adjacent, but it's like a organization that's going to be helping the community. So I'm really open to, because at the end of the day, I know after this boot camp, I also be open with kind of the work I'm looking for, but I'm also not like super like no higher ed, but you just never know, because it all just really depends also on the people, like my team who I potentially work for and what their mission is as well.
So Mel, so I'm wondering if part of that, as I was hearing you, go through the process right now, I'm wondering if there's a opportunity to dip into higher ed only, what am I trying to say, or what am I trying to ask? Potentially work with us on a consulting type of way, or because I think with my experience in higher ed, you're right. It's very hard to, and I just had this conversation with someone earlier today, to unleash the innovative spirit within an organization that is this rigid, and that's a wonderful description of the the boat and the different layers, because it can really stifle that creativity that a lot of us really embrace actually, and want to have in our lives every single day. And so I was just wondering if you would be open to, coming back for whether it's consulting. You'll be getting a little note about WOW for this coming February. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you now, potentially, and that's how you kind of dip back in. Share with us the wisdom of what you've seen while you've been out of higher ed, and maybe give us a little bit of a, I'm going to be selfish and give us a little bit of your experience for us to understand also that there are other opportunities outside of higher education. I keep coming back to, you can love a job, but the job is not going to love you back. That's just the truth. It's the people within the organization that really make your experience with that organization make or break it, really. It's not the actual job, it's not the actual organization, it's the people. And so I always think about it within that context. So, you being outside of higher ed, yes, that breaks my heart. A lot of folks are leaving. And is there a way to come back to maybe chip away at some of those pieces that do need to continue to evolve and shift, because our students are needing that. They need that shift.
Yep.
So anyway, okay, I'm gonna stop there, but asking that question of coming back and maybe to consult or to be active, but in a different way.
Yes. Yeah, and that's how I started my current role. I was a consultant to the ed tech company. So even like the idea of a consultant is something so new to me. And if anyone wants to have a conversation about 1099 tax forms and tax write-offs, I'm more than happy to help like people understand, because I'm going through that myself. But you're right. I think, and that's the thing, like I really wanted to break y'all. And this is just here, once again, this is me getting close up to you all. I grew up in a culture in higher ed where if you talked about job search, you're like outcast. And you know, that's me having my degree way, you know, like 10, 12 years ago or whatnot. And then I had, you know, like all these different friends in different industries where they're just talking about their next steps, like skilling up. I didn't even know what skill up meant. And so I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And then, you know, they're like, oh, well, what's your path, right? And so there's being RD, AD, director, VP, you know, all of that stuff, right? By Rose. And so I think there's some, you know, the reason why I'm bringing it up is, you know, my students taught me to be curious, right? And I'm teaching them to be curious in their college career. How come like I can't, or how come like I can't have these conversations with like my staff who are discerning their next steps, right? And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to like do, is just break this idea, this culture that, you know, it's like we can't talk about, like we can't dream, right? And I know there's like different mixed feelings about that, and that's fine. But also I'm just here to say, like, give yourself permission and find, for me, what really worked, going back to, I think Susu's question, that journey was, I had to really find the people who I trusted to like affirm and be okay. Like if you leave, Mel, like you're not going to be ousted, or, you know, like, and I was like, I was scared. I was really scared because I was kind of
Or
like,
added to this like imaginary list that's out, or maybe there is a list out there, but like people sometimes say,
yeah,
oh, you're going to go on the list. I'm like, what list? What are you talking about?
yes,
And who is creating that list?
yes, yep.
And I'm sorry, but what is their demographic? Like, I'm okay. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to
speak. Yes, exactly. That's yeah, that's like my mission, to be part of a movement to encourage educators to talk about like what they're curious in life. And yeah, so I'll leave this there. But yes, I could definitely go on more and more about that.
Thank you, Mel. I think based on what you're talking about right now, I'd love to ask you a final question. You talked a little bit about people of color leaving at exponential rates, right? And having really challenging experiences in higher ed. And I think that, I don't know about most people on this call, but I know many of myself and many people of color who I work with have often thought about jumping ship, right? And considering, to go along with your cruise ship analogy, and leaving higher ed. And I think it comes, you know, for me, I come from a very collectivist culture, you know, family is everything. And then coming into higher ed, it's kind of every human for themselves. And it's not about the best person for the job. It's about who you know and what you know and shoulder tapping and all of those things. So I know, and based on conversations that you and I have had, I know that you have struggled with some of those parts of, you know, the toxic pieces of higher ed. So what advice do you have for people of color navigating the field, trying to tough it out, trying to make a difference, trying to, like you, be an advocate for people who need the extra support? What advice do you have?
Oh, that's good. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. What advice do I have? My first advice is, what you're feeling, like I and a community of other people behind me I want to affirm that. And I think that is real, because that's just, for me, was easy to kind of, like, my curiosity is just to cover it up, because it's like, oh, well, like I need a job, and, you know, like, I don't want to shame my family, or I feel like I'm needed here, so like I can't go. So I think that piece is, you know, if you're feeling it, that's okay. Like, I want to normalize that. Like, that's okay to feel. And also another tip that I've been kind of sharing and talking to other people, with the whole, if anyone's feeling like their master's degree, you know, like I got a master's degree and I spent all this time and money, it's like, it's not useful. I do want to say it is useful, and that your degree is a toolkit for how it's going to help you in your next step, right? Because I think many of us got into the field of higher ed with various different, you know, like degree backgrounds or whatnot. And the whole, like, you could degree in higher ed, you don't need a requirement. Well, that's going to be the same for the other, you know, industry you go into. It's all about really how to market yourself and how to, and my last bullet point is, as you're, you know, discerning your next steps, I think, you know, thinking about like, what is your story and owning your story. And I say that because I didn't know what my story was when I wanted to leave. I was just kind of like all over the place. I was trying to fit like a tech culture, which I didn't even know what the tech culture was, because I was like, I just didn't do not even do the research, but I just didn't really feel I could fit in because of like a lot of white men that are in the industry. I look at, mission websites with like staff and who are their people, and it's just the same demographic. And so I think, first of all, is as owning your story, kind of like why you're feeling this way. And then I think it really comes down to where does your purpose, where do you want to take your purpose, right? So whether it may not be the right, maybe you're not in the right role, or you want to try like something that's different, but still within higher ed. I think it's really just sitting down with the people you love and just really talking about like where you want to bring your purpose. And also remember, everything is temporary. And I say that as I repeat myself earlier, is I think for me was like, we come into res life, we have these like contracts, we kind of have to stick to these contracts. And I'm the first one, y'all. Many people work with me. Like, I'm not afraid to leave a contract mid-year. I'm the mid-year hire. I will leave and come in mid-year. And that's the thing I just kind of embraced and kind of figured it out. And so I think just taking things like that, things are temporary, whether if that you don't like I'm the first one to say you don't have to finish your contract. I could also, once again, have, different perspectives, but I'm okay with that because things happen in life. So hopefully those tips will be helpful to kind of like think about and discern. And I'm also too, before we end the call, I'm more than happy to have like more conversations offline about this. I'm just like super passionate just about really just helping people like make the best like choices for them based on like what situation, that they're in. Because we're all unique, but we also have a common thread that, like we're all struggling in our ways, and that we are looking for like empowerment and so that we are able to keep moving forward together, as a community. So hopefully that's helpful, Matt. Hopefully.
I think it's amazing. Thank you, Mel. I think we are at time. So thank you all for joining us today. And please join me in just virtually thanking Mel for being such an awesome speaker and sharing your story. I think there were certainly some really a lot of great wisdom that I think a lot of us can benefit from. So thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all.